Living Well Seniors Communities from Australia is the first licensed international provider of aged care services in Indonesia. 10 years ago when we formed our company, there were no private providers and no government regulations for a brand new sector. 10 years on, the sector is growing, with different private providers providing different services for different seniors markets throughout Indonesia. One of our Living Well facilities includes Citra Premier Premium Seniors Club, located here in Citra Garden City in Jakarta's west, providing our members daily activities that are mentally and physically stimulating, with chef-prepared meals and daily healthcare checkups. My name is Benjamin Cass, founder and director of Living Well Seniors Communities.
Welcome to the show, Ben.
Thank you.
Thanks for showing us around this amazing facility. It's an awesome concept. Senior care is catching on in Indonesia as people age, with the pool of those with sizable disposable income growing. I like your company's motto, more hospitality, less hospital. 10 years ago when you started your business, what concept did you have in mind?
We identified pretty early on that there was a gap in aged care services to the kind of middle upper demographics. There was simply nothing, no provision at all for aged care services previously, other than, and it'll sort of send a shiver up the spine of Indonesian seniors, the term panti jompo, which was typically reserved for disadvantaged seniors, people who may have been abandoned by family or for whatever financial reasons couldn't support themselves. Other than panti jompo, there was no aged care services at all, no professional trained staff, certainly no facilities like what we enjoy here. So we identified that was the gap, providing services for that middle to upper demographic for Indonesian seniors. The second part of it was recognizing that Indonesia is going through a seismic shift in its demographics, just like we did, in Australia maybe 30, 40 years ago. Some of those key drivers, you had urbanisation, you had families who were once living in large landed homes, moving into urban centres, living in apartments. So the whole idea of a 3-generation family living in a small apartment doesn't really fit. You had women in the workforce. If you assume that women were the primary caregiver, you've now in Indonesia today more women who are college educated than men. If you assume that they're in the workforce, that then begs the question, then who is taking care of all of these elderly people? And the third aspect, of course, is simply the fact that Indonesians are living longer. So whereas, if you hit that kind of 60 or 70 milestone, maybe even 10 or 15 years ago in Indonesia, that expectation now is certainly much higher. But the question, of course, isn't so much how much longer will someone live, it's the quality of that life.
Was there a particular model or country you looked up to, and what kind of adjustments have you had to make being in Jakarta?
As an Australian, obviously a lot of what we do is styled from experience that we had back home. But even the notion of having a seniors clubhouse was even something quite foreign now even to Australians. For Indonesian market, we were going from either nothing to seniors living, and we thought the idea of having these seniors clubhouses operating Monday to Friday, where elderly people can come, gather, meet, make friends in a mentally and physically stimulating environment, we thought that was kind of the appropriate bridge before entering the seniors living market. So first the seniors clubhouses and then seniors living afterwards. We've done a good job of recognizing the different ethnic diversity of Indonesia. A clubhouse like here at Citra Premier, where the bulk of the membership is ethnic Indonesian Chinese, that's reflected in the kind of activities we undertake. We have Mandarin lessons, we celebrate Chinese New Year. But of course, if we were located at a different location with a different group of a different ethnic background, the clubhouse offering may be a little bit different.
Ben, the demand for elderly healthcare will continue to increase. Given the local culture where many families might feel more comfortable having their elderly parents at home healthcare is also very relevant. Is that something you're looking at as well?
We're acutely aware of the role of pembantu and personal care assistants in the Indonesian market. That's something quite ingrained, and as an Australian, it was something I had to get used to. And we're particularly aware of elderly people at home with, dare I say it, unqualified and or untrained help. What we've tried to do here is bring people out of their homes into a social environment, for them to be able to connect with other people of their own age, the similar interests, a mentally and physically stimulating environment. We haven't gone down the home care route yet, deliberately because we want to bring people together. But again, we're aware that that's probably a business line at some point, and that when we talk about the seniors industry, that can mean lots of things to lots of different people. For some people, seniors living will be the ideal option. For some people, a seniors clubhouse, like what we operate here, will be the perfect fit. For other people, it may be home care assistance.
Now, whether at home or at a facility such as your clubhouse, the key really is in having capable care providers. So how are you addressing that need?
About 10 years ago, along with 3 or 4 other providers, we created a new association called ASLI, Association of Seniors Living Indonesia. And the purpose of ASLI was also to create standards for government, to lead government down a path, because there were simply no standards, no accreditation, no rules or regulations whatsoever about the seniors living industry before in Indonesia. All this was all brand new, and that included standards and accreditation for personal care attendants. We are proud that we have been part of the push by ASLI to include government now officially recognising caregiving as a profession, and it's got its own course, its own accreditation, licensed by the Indonesian government. And that occurred about 2 or 3 years ago. For us now in recruiting staff, we now have that extra tool in sourcing the kind of people that we want to attract.
I think that's an achievement by itself, reaching that certification to ensure quality of care.
And to be fair to the Indonesian government, there's been a big shift in the time I've been here, the last, 10, 11 years. There's been a recognition by the Indonesian government that something does need to be done in this sector. It's understood that it has to move fast, and as part of that, it needs to recognise caregiving as a proper profession and give it the due consideration that it is owed, because it's an extremely difficult job, and the job that our staff do every day here is quite remarkable. And I, without any exaggeration, I say, you know, these staff transform people's lives.
If we look at facts, numbers are showing Indonesia has an abundance of healthcare workers, whereas in Australia, there's an ever increasing demand for care providers. What are your thoughts on this, and how are you planning to tackle the market in Australia?
So this for us is really exciting, and I believe over the next few months there'll be some announcements as a business how we are expanding back into the Australian market, because we are an Australian business. We're an Australian business operating in Indonesia, but we offer no services back. A big part of that's going to be the opportunity for personal care attendants in Indonesia, qualified by an Australian recognised RTO, providing aged care services into Australia. So our job will be to connect personal care attendants in Indonesia to the Australian marketplace. They will be fully qualified. They will meet all of the required English tests. They'll require all the required Certificate 3 in individual support, which is part of that qualification basis to be a personal caregiver in Australia. But it is no stretch to use the term aged care crisis in Australia. In simple terms, there are more older people than there are younger people to support them. Now that has implications across so many different spheres. As to our line of work, who is physically there to support these elderly people? And the Australian government, just as I give kudos to the Indonesian government, the Australian government equally over the last year has recognised that this crisis requires more than simply hoping for homegrown talent. And it recognises now with new visa classes that it does require talent from overseas. Part of that mix will include Indonesia, and I'm pleased that Living Well will be part of that, connecting personal care attendants from Indonesia to Australian aged care operators.
Can you tell us some more details about that plan, about that activity? Is it about sending the first batch to attend lessons or courses
so,
at an
so
Australian
this is the
RTO?
exciting part. So a big part of it, because there are obvious financial realities. We have been able to team up with a registered RTO in Australia, which will be able to offer the courses hybrid, both online and in person here in Jakarta, in partnership with an existing school of nursing here in Indonesia. Combining the two, an aged care operator in Australia will have the opportunity to employ a diploma or a bachelor's qualified nurse from Indonesia who also holds a Certificate 3 in individual support from Australia, and quite simply also have practical experience in one of Living Well's facilities here in Indonesia. So I think for an aged care operator in Australia offers an enormous opportunity of not just sourcing employees, but sourcing, frankly, talent and people who are fully qualified, people who have undergone experience in an Australian managed facility like this for the Australian marketplace. So we're going to launch that in the next 2 or 3 months. And I think that's going to be a really exciting part of our business, but we'll genuinely transform how staff are sourced in Australia.
Well, that's excellent. Thank you for sharing that update with us. I want to move on to I guess, a bird's eye perspective view of the industry, whereby we see the trend moving from sick care really to health care. You know, that involves a lot of industries. I mean, you're talking about pharmaceutical, you're talking about medical technology, furniture, and a whole lot more. What is the ecosystem like for senior care?
Relatively immature in Indonesia. Again, candidly, 10 years ago, we didn't even have this discussion at all. Versus now, my guess is this. Township developers appealing to that kind of middle to middle upper demographic will make seniors clubhouse and seniors living just part of the course. If you are a property developer in Indonesia rolling out a new township, just as typically you would also roll out a mall, a hospital, a school, you will also include senior services. So I think that will just become the standard in the future, much like the vision of Ciputra to include ourselves and develop this facility here, Citra Premier. About a couple of months ago, our company was engaged to provide advice on a Japanese company asking for advice on retrofitting vehicles for disabled access here in Indonesia. Now again, that's a discussion which simply would never have taken place a few years ago. And we are most especially pleased to have our association with developers like Ciputra Property, who, to their credit, it was their vision to provide a 3-generation services within townships. And that was particularly the vision of Pachi, the founder of Ciputra Property, sadly only months before he passed away, to ensure that just as there are services as a township developer for young people, young adults, restaurants, cafes, hospitals, schools, the obvious gap in that jigsaw puzzle was, what about services for elderly people? And that was the vision of Pachi before he passed away. So we are pleased to be part of that, providing these kind of services for elderly people here in Indonesia.
Ben, you must be pretty proud of what you've been able to achieve on the process along those 10 years. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, not without the pitfalls and mistakes which go with anyone undertaking business here in Indonesia. I know it sounds terribly cliched, but partnerships are everything, and finding the right partner is obviously the hard part. We had a few false starts. We had a few false starts at different sites around Indonesia and different partners until eventually the pairing between Ciputra Property and ourselves, which has allowed us to expand those. In 2024, we will be opening other locations in other townships around Jakarta, appealing to that middle to middle upper demographic.
But one thing for sure, the ageing process can't be stopped or reversed. How is the current industry keeping up with changing demographics?
I think to answer that, may I say that I think there is finally an understanding now that it's not just about living longer. The question, I think, is also now about how will a person live. Let's assume someone doesn't have any existing preconditions, premorbidities, let's assume they're not drinking or smoking and they take reasonably good care of themselves. If you're a woman, you can hit that 80, 90 mark. If you're a man, you can hit that 70, 80 mark. That's not really the challenge anymore. And we've got lots of great hospitals, even in cities like Jakarta, to keep people going. The real question though is how and in what kind of an environment? What does that last 10 or 20 years of someone's life look like, physically and mentally? And that's why we're so happy to be having these kind of discussions, and also with the Indonesian government and with different property developers across Indonesia, that they understand that the days of, nodding off at 50 or 60 years of age is something of the past, but now the task is to achieve a quality seniors lifestyle, not simply living longer.
Well, Ben, thank you for such an insightful conversation.
Most welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Robert.
Cheers.
Thanks so much.